Today, we are breaking down a portfolio that comes to us from Chennai. This individual, Hardik, has sold off his business and portfolio value today that we are reviewing is about 121 crores. That's the current value of the portfolio, and the invested value is about 90 crores. And let's see what this portfolio has in store for us today.
So preliminary look at the portfolio.
Yeah.
One, there is some asset allocation strategy here because you see 33% allocation towards fixed income, 67 towards equity.
Yeah.
Which means he's at least thought of some liquidity event. Rest he's letting the portfolio grow over time.
Understood. So essentially, the portfolio allocation as a strategy is well executed.
There is some thought to it.
There is some thought to it.
Of course, we need to deep dive to understand the investment objectives, whether the portfolio allocation is right or not.
Understood.
But there is some thought, at least a preliminary view suggests that there is some thought that's gone into it.
Understood.
The second part, if you look at the first page itself, 6.3% of the overall allocation has gone towards global equities.
Yeah.
Which brings me to the second point, that even within equity, there is some allocation strategy. 60% towards large cap and balance towards mid and small cap.
Which is actually a pretty good strategy, right?
Given the current scenario, it seems to be a reasonably well-constructed portfolio.
Understood.
If we look at the asset allocation and overall allocation within equities towards categories and towards India and global equities.
Right. So this guy has got diversification right on an asset class level.
On an asset class.
Right? Understood.
Yet we see the portfolios underperforming the benchmark.
Yeah. I think, and I think I can see the reason on page number 2, right?
Right.
80 mutual funds, which is like at least 70 more than what we recommend, right? Which is 7 to 10.
My read of the portfolio, if you see bulk of the portfolio, perhaps only from 2020 onwards, we see, or 2019 onwards, he's been allocating because the cost has increased significantly from 2019 onwards.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
If you look at the split of where he's allocated money, 80% is towards direct schemes, 20% is towards regular schemes.
Understood.
You mentioned that he sold his business.
Yeah.
And a lot of people who sell their businesses and have a lot of free time, they start getting into investments themselves. Which reflects in the split of 80-20, where 80% is through direct plan.
Right. So 80% direct plan. Possible cause is that this individual essentially is investing into these funds themselves and not taking any external help.
Correct.
Right?
That is a
possibility here.
That again also reflects in the fact that he's still learning how to invest, where to invest.
How are you coming to that?
Through the number of funds.
Understood.
There is no high conviction investment happening in any scheme or fund. Typically, the recommendation of 7 to 10 is when an expert is allocating money towards a portfolio. When you are trying to do it yourself, you try and minimize the risk associated with equities and hence try and buy more and more.
Understood.
And try and cover it up with more schemes.
It's like basically like you're trying to learn and you're essentially trying to invest into new mutual funds.
Correct.
Because probably the previous experiment did not work out the way you thought.
Did not work out. You are a believer in buy and hold, so you've still held on to it, but fresh money you've allocated elsewhere. All of this has led to over-diversification.
Understood.
Which does not necessarily minimize your risk proportionately. But the one thing that it definitely does, it does not allow you to outperform the benchmark.
Understood. So over-diversification is probably one of the major reasons why the portfolio is not beating the benchmark, because there are 80 mutual funds.
80 mutual funds.
Got it.
Mutual funds.
The portfolio's annual cost is about 1 crore here. If managed through like active fund manager, could have been brought down to about 75 lakhs. So 25 lakhs saving a year. I know that probably for this individual with 121 crores, 25 lakh saving seems low, but it is still a meaningful number to kind of save or optimize for, right?
I would always peg cost to the portfolio performance, right? Here the portfolio is underperforming, so any cost is significant. Here the issue has been that this individual is trying to learn, but has not been taking expert advice seemingly, which is why we see that the portfolio has been underperforming, keeping the cost aside.
Probably this investor is also thinking that it is easier to pick mutual funds by themselves rather than going to an expert, right? What would you say to that?
And we've observed this kind of opinion coming in from people, from clients. Couple of things. There are 1200 plus relevant equity schemes, mutual fund schemes in the country today. And there are 2000 odd investable stocks.
Yeah.
So while everyone thinks stock picking requires assistance, they don't necessarily feel that mutual funds require assistance. But the universe is equally large.
Yeah.
The divergence between the top quartile of mutual fund and the bottom quartile of mutual fund could be as high as 10%
So essentially,
per annum.
so when you say top quartile and bottom quartile, let's make it easier for our audience. Suppose there are 100 mutual funds. The top 25 are probably giving returns as high as 18,
And the bottom 25
and the bottom 25%.
would be 8 odd percent. Now,
So if you end up essentially picking the bottom 25, you are essentially might be at the risk of losing 10% annualized return.
absolutely. So the divergence between returns of the top and bottom quartile are significantly high. Once this data is presented to clients, they understand that one, picking mutual fund is complex because the universe is massive. Two, if you end up picking an average or below average mutual fund, you are at significant risk of eroding capital value.
Understood. And I think I feel like one of the ways that people also select when they're doing like DIY investing or mutual funds is going to Google, trying to like type top mutual funds of 2024 or 2025, and then like seeing past rankings, right?
Correct.
And probably picking a fund which was like which is the top ranking fund last year. In your experience, has that approach ever worked?
So that is the number one reason why client portfolios underperform.
Okay.
Because more often than not, they've looked at previous rankings and picked up the mutual fund, which means the funds that have already delivered exceptional returns, if they sit in your portfolio now after the returns are delivered, they are likelier to underperform basis the analysis that we've done. That's also easier for some of the smaller advisors to sell basis past returns, because that's easy information, somebody is easily comprehensible, and then investors end up picking those funds.
I was actually seeing this one data point where the third best performing mutual fund of last year was the 21st best mutual fund performing of the preceding year.
Correct.
Right? So essentially, had you gone by that logic, you would have never got the third best performing mutual fund in your portfolio.
Absolutely.
Because it was performing 21st the previous year.
Absolutely.
Right? So clearly means that past performance is absolutely not the way you should think about portfolio construction.
Absolutely.
Understood. And Hardik, if we kind of like go down a little more and probably specifically into the equity mutual fund portfolio, you see that the underperformance is actually greater here. It's actually the fixed component part of his portfolio that is actually keeping his overall performance of the portfolio kind of high.
Correct. If you look at the kind of funds that have led to underperformance, I mean, of course, you know, on one end, we've spoken about the fact that he's allocated to global equities, which is a good diversification strategy. But he's also allocated a lot of money to thematic funds. One, the fact that you over-diversified. Two, you've taken a different type of risk, which again, with thematic funds, we've seen this issue happen over and over again in other portfolios, that you typically end up entering after the hype has been created, which means that you would end up entering after the prices are already reasonably high in that particular theme or sector.
Just like you know, buying at the top essentially, right?
Absolutely. Classic example was defense as a theme last year.
Yeah.
It did reasonably well until a point in time.
Yeah.
But the AUM build-up only happened after that. So if you're entering a theme after a rally has done,
you're not going to benefit from it, right? You're like,
setting yourself up for disappointment.
If I were to ask you the top 3 learnings that people who are watching this video can take from this portfolio breakdown, what would they be?
One, there is an asset allocation ideology that appears here, right? There is 33% towards fixed income, 67% towards equities. The second important thing that we noticed here in the portfolio is that within equity, there is a decent diversification in terms of category allocation. The one thing that perhaps the individual could have done better is realize that in this learning phase, we cannot make high conviction bets, which would mean we will not outperform the benchmark because we've over-diversified. Ideal portfolio recommended allocation is around 7 to 10 schemes. We are at 80 schemes. The portfolio is geared in a way in which it will not be able to outperform the benchmark.
And what can that person do to bring down these 80 mutual funds to 10?
Until you are in the phase while you are learning, perhaps you hand it over to an expert, understand their ideology, understand their thesis.
So essentially what you're saying is that have some capital for yourself to experiment and learn, but not your entire wealth.
Not your entire wealth, especially if you got 120 crores.
So especially if you got 120 crore. Got it. And you know, last question on this, Hardik, and probably this is a question that came to me as we were discussing. A lot of people might think that because one has 121 crore rupees, they can essentially take 80 mutual funds. Because even if couple of them or few of them turn out to be these multi-baggers, then they are set.
I'd actually think, on the contrary, no. What would happen is, the moment there is never a significant allocation towards a particular scheme, your 2 or 3% allocation, which would be the max in case of 80 mutual fund schemes, even if it were a multi-bagger, it would be dragged down by our underperformers.
No, this was very helpful. Thank you so much, Hardik, for clearing this out for me and the rest of our viewers. Folks, thank you. We will see you again for the next episode of Portfolio Breakdown series.
If you would like to get a detailed breakdown of your own portfolio, you can scan the QR on the screen and download the Dezerv app.